I live in Southern California, and frankly, I don't have a lot of use for woolen sweaters. If I'm going to make a garment, I tend to make them from cotton or linen or fibers that are just better suited for warmer climates. But as I have learned from many failures, yes, sometimes my knitting fails, cotton is not wool. It does not behave like wool. And a lot of the techniques that we are taught when we first learn to knit are actually designed to work with these special qualities of wool, which means when working on cotton projects, we need different tips and tricks. So hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give this video a thumbs up, and let's talk about working with cotton. So my first #1 tip about cotton is to actually understand how cotton is different from wool. What makes this such a beautiful and unique fiber? Because once you understand how cotton behaves, you're going to be more empowered to choose techniques and patterns that suit this wonderful fiber. If you're like, Carrie, I already know all about cotton, I'm good there, no worries. Down in the description box, I do have timestamps to different parts of the video if you want to skip to something else. But if you are coming to cotton for the first time, I think this is going to be a really helpful section. Also down in the description box, you're going to find a list of materials and resources that I think are really helpful from today's video. One of them is going to be an affiliate link to this book, The Knitter's Book of Yarn by Clara Parks. Clara Parks goes through all the different fibers, animal-based, plant-based, the synthetic fibers. It also includes projects if you want to play around with some of these fibers yourself. So a link to this book will be down in the description box. It is clearly marked as an affiliate link, which means if you click on my link and you make a purchase, I might earn a small commission, and this helps support my channel. If you utilize any of my affiliate links, or you leave me a tip through SuperThanks or buy me a coffee, thank you so much. It is so greatly appreciated. But let's get into why we're really here, which is to talk about cotton. There's really two specific qualities about cotton and most plant-based fiber that makes it very different from wool. One is cotton, unlike lamb's wool, is very straight. It has very little crimp. And crimp in a fiber is what makes it elastic. Cotton is not elastic. Here's like a strand of cotton. I pull it and it just goes back just a little bit. If I take this ball of yarn here, this is 100% wool. Well, it had a little, sock yarn mixed in with it. We'll just put that there. If I take this wool and I stretch it out like this, if I really pull it, it can bounce back a bit. But cotton, I pull it and it bounces back very little. And the more I pull it, the straighter it's gonna stay. The other quality about cotton that makes it very different is wool. If you put wool underneath the microscope, you're gonna see that there's these little scales all over it. If you take wool, right, and the two strands are against each other, those scales kind of catch on each other, all right? And if you've ever tried to purposely ladder down a stitch that's made of 100% non-superwash wool, you know it can take quite a bit of effort to get that stitch to ladder down. Cotton, on the other hand, is completely smooth. It doesn't have scales. Plant-based fibers don't have scales the way that animal fibers do. And so it is slippery. Cotton, it's smooth and it's straight, which means that any technique with wool that is relying on that sort of the scales and the feltability of wool isn't going to work with cotton. It means that any stitch pattern that's really elastic, like ribbing, that's relying on that crimp that wool has, isn't going to work with cotton. You can knit ribbing with cotton, but if it's just 100% cotton and you knit a rib pattern, it's not going to have that elasticity the way that wool does. It's not going to be functional. It'll just be decorative. So cotton does behave differently than wool. Does that mean cotton is bad to work with? No, not necessarily. It just means that it's different. And cotton has many wonderful qualities. Cotton, you know, a cotton t-shirt isn't going to cling to your body and be form-fitting, but what you gain is beautiful drape. Cotton drapes beautifully. In fact, I love utilizing cotton for things like shawls or stoles because I might want that beautiful drape. Cotton oftentimes can have a really nice sheen to it, a kind of shimmer to it that is just really lovely. The other thing is cotton, because it's straight and because it doesn't have halo the way that wool does, it creates really beautiful, crisp stitch definition. Here I have this in progress. I haven't taken this out in a while. I need to finish it. I'm so close. But this is made actually from a linen cotton metallic blend. I absolutely love this yarn. And I put this lacy cable pattern up the center. This is gonna be the back of a tunic. And you can see just the gorgeous stitch definition that is achieved with this. This stitch pattern would look very different if I knitted it with a wool yarn. Now, when I first started knitting, I did not know any of this about cotton. I didn't know that it was an elastic and that it was slippery. I did not know. I tried to make hats that were designed for wool with cotton, and then I'd be like, why does this ribbing not do anything? I made this headband with cotton yarn, and I love this headband, but when I made it initially, it didn't fit on my head because the headband was designed for wool, and it was meant, the wool is supposed to have negative ease and stretch and cling to my head, and this did not do it. Something you can do, and what I did, is you can get nylon elastic thread and actually sew it into the fabric. I'm gonna bring this up as close as I can and see those lines there, those white lines? That is elastic that I sewed into just either side of the headband in a few places, just a couple places. And by adding that little bit of elastic, I made this headband functional. If I needed more elasticity for this headband, I could just add in some more elastic thread. So you can make it work with a project like this with cotton if you want. It's just that you're gonna have to think about how you're gonna add in a fiber that's going to give you elasticity. You can sew in elastic thread after the fact like I did here. You can hold cotton double with an elastic thread and knit with it throughout, and you're gonna get a lot of elasticity if you do that. Instead of choosing a 100% cotton yarn, you can choose a cotton wool, cotton acrylic, or a cotton nylon blended yarn. These blends really kind of take the best quality of each of the fibers and makes a really great ball of yarn. If you want to work with cotton or any plant-based fiber, I think it's always ideal if you're going to purchase a pattern, that is designed to work with these fibers, because the designer should have really considered the qualities specific to cotton to make sure that that pattern is going to be a success. And it takes a lot of the guesswork out for you. However, if you have a sweater pattern that's made of wool and you really want to make it out of cotton, you can choose to make that substitution, but you need to know what you're getting yourself into. You need to know that the ribbing is not going to behave the same unless it gets some other fiber help from a fiber companion, like we've already talked about. You really should consider also the weight of the yarn. You can make a garment out of 100% worsted weighted cotton. In fact, I have. This project behind me, I made with worsted weighted cotton. And I love it. It's so cozy. It is also very heavy. Cotton, it actually is heavier than wool tends to be. And so personally, especially after doing this project, I would, if I were to make a cotton sweater again, or cotton cardigan like this, I would choose to use a DK or lighter yarn just so there isn't as much weight and bulk to the project. So choose your patterns carefully, or choose your project ideas carefully when you're working with cotton. So you may remember my video,
Swatch of Horrors!
In my swatch of horrors, I did sort of distinguish between kind of mistakes, structural errors, and aesthetic errors. And structural errors you must always have to fix, whereas aesthetic errors, a lot of times you can just kind of like let it go if you want to, because it's aesthetic. People may not even notice it. Well, when it comes to cotton, it has beautiful stitch definition, and I love it. But cotton is a bit unforgiving when it comes to mistakes. There's no elasticity to the yarn. There's no halo. Cotton things don't tend to just even themselves out. With cotton, you tend to find out really quickly, if you have any tension problems. So with cotton, a lot of times, if there is an aesthetic error, I'm gonna go back and fix it even then, because it's not gonna be hiding. There's not gonna be a lot of hiding it, unless I can hide it with maybe some duplicate stitch. I mean, if I can disguise it, I will, but I want to deal with it in some ways because it's just gonna be much more readily apparent in cotton than it would be in a wool fiber. When you're working with cotton, it is a slippier fiber, meaning that if you take a cotton yarn and you work with it on metal needles, which are very slick, you can start to lose a lot of control over your stitches. Now, I personally like really slick needles, and so I will personally often choose metal needles to still work with cotton, but I may not choose my fastest metal needles. For this project, instead of utilizing my beloved Addy needles, I chose to use my Hayahayas. Now, my Hayahayas, these are stainless steel needles, and they're still plenty slick, but they're not as slick as my Addies. If you find you're dropping a lot of stitches, you might want to choose an even grippier material like wood, plastic, or even, if you enjoy working with it, which I don't, but hey, this is a matter of personal preference, bamboo. Or carbon fiber. I have carbon fiber needles. I love my carbon fiber needles. Love them. But yes, plant-based fibers often benefit work with a grippier needle. And if you're like, Carrie, I only have one type of needle, metal, might be time to explore more needle materials. We'll be saying this a lot. Remember, cotton, it's inelastic, but it does stretch. As you wear it, gravity pulls down on the stitches. With wool, once you wash it, those stitches will bounce back pretty much to shape. With cotton, those stitches stayed pulled, which is how you end up with like the hand knit cotton sweater that becomes the cotton tunic that becomes the cotton dress. What you can do, however, is account for that future work of gravity. And do a gauge swatch, and after you've washed it, after you block it, you hang it up, all right, with some weight on it, and you let it hang there for a couple of days, and then measure your swatch again. And a lot of times you'll find that you might want to actually go down a needle size or two when you knit your project, and this is going to help to account for the future growth of your sweater or whatever cotton item you might be making. If you want to know more about this, about how to make a proper gauge swatch, including doing a hang test, I do have a whole video about it. I will link it up here and down in the description box. Here's the thing about cotton, and it comes back to the same thing. It is not elastic. Elasticity in the wool actually helps you keep tension with less effort when you're knitting, and that elasticity doesn't exist with the cotton, which means that when you work with cotton, a lot of times your hands have to do a lot more work. Cotton has a reputation of being harder on the hands, so take more breaks. If you normally sit down and knit for 30 minutes, consider only knitting that project for 20 minutes. And if you are like, but Carrie, I still want to knit more, this is where having a side quest project is really helpful. If you follow me on any of my other socials or even on this channel, this is gonna look familiar. This is the June Blooms vest by Knit Eco Chic that I have been working on. And it is a cotton silk blend yarn that this is being made from. I have another side project made of wool that I'm also doing.
And I've been doing just some video shorts here and on TikTok about this sock project.
But kind of switching back and forth between having a cotton project and a small wool project really kind of helps stave off the hand fatigue. I know that a lot of you out there love joins that help avoid weaving in ends. And I get it because I like to avoid weaving in ends. The fact is, joins like Russian join and felted join really depend on the feltability of wool to work. If you try to do a Russian join, which I did once try to do, if you try to do a Russian join with cotton, once you've worked that tail back into the yarn itself, you pull, that tail's gonna slip right out. Trust me, I know, I tried it. So what are some good joins with cotton? Well, first of all, there's always old reliable, even though people don't like it to talk about it, there's just the reliable drop one ball, join in your new ball, and weave in your tails at the end. 98% of the time, that join in method is going to work. But sometimes I will use a join that is called the braided join. I have a whole video about it, which I will link up here. Actually, all the joins that I'm talking about, I have done a video on. I will have a playlist of them if you want to check those out after this. I'll have it linked up here or down in the description box. And in that playlist, you're gonna find what is probably my second favorite join method, which is the braided join. Braided join is great, and what I love about braided join is that it will work with slipperier yarns like cotton and linen, and pretty much almost any plied yarn, you can do a braided join. You might have other preferences. If you are out there, let me know in the comments below. How do you like to join in yarn when you're working with cotton? You know, I have my preferences. What are yours and why? I'd love to hear about it down in the comments below. And once again, down in the description, I will have a link to that playlist that talks about various join in methods. Truthfully, it's really not that much different than weaving in your ends with wool, except again, you have to remember cotton is slippier than wool, and some aspects of tips and tricks for weaving in your ends well does involve on relying on those scales of the wool to kind of help keep your tail in place. You don't get that with cotton. That doesn't mean you can't do a great weave that is going to last the test of time. It just means that we have to take some things into consideration. One, weave a longer tail. It's like with a wool tail, I'll weave it in for like 2 to 3 inches. With a cotton tail, I like to weave in more like 3 to 4 inches of that tail.
You can see that here in this project, but there's something else that you may notice.
Right here, I left a little bit of a tag there. Leaving a little bit more of a tail, like just a little 1/4 inch of tail, kind of helps keep that tail to the back of the work so it doesn't work to the front. Especially with working with worsted weighted yarn, weaving in your tail, it's gonna create more bulk in that spot where the tail is woven in. And that little extra bit of bulk can be a little noticeable. To disguise it more, if it's possible, what I will do is actually split the plies of the cotton yarn, okay? And then I will weave those plies in different directions. And what that does is it reduces the bulk from the tail of any one area, and it actually helps kind of secure that tail to the fabric as well. Sometimes you're gonna get a cotton yarn where you try to split the plies and there isn't enough twist in the yarn to like safely split the plies and have those plies hold their integrity. But if it is a yarn where you can split those plies and weave those plies off into different directions, it's a really nice way to weave in your tails so it's not very apparent where those tails are in the final project. Sometimes I have read from sources, people will say things like cotton doesn't really take a block, or it doesn't block well, and I'm here to say my personal opinion, that's not exactly true. So let's talk about something big picture about blocking, right? We've all heard it. Blocking is like magic. Like you block something and it's just like everything looks better and things look more evened out and it's just amazing. And it takes something where maybe as you were knitting it, it just seemed kind of meh, and then when you're done with your blocking, you're like, it's wow. Okay, this is definitely true that transformation can be very dramatic with wool. The transformation when you block cotton is not as dramatic, okay? And it's for the same reasons that everything else is different with cotton. It is straight and it is inelastic, and actually I haven't talked about this much, but it has no halo. That doesn't mean that blocking doesn't help a cotton project. It absolutely does. It's that the transformation just isn't as dramatic. So you have to temper your expectations in terms of what blocking is going to accomplish with a cotton project. That being said, you can use the same blocking techniques with cotton as you can with wool. There are some things you need to be careful of. So this project, I think, is a really good example, is garter stitch, and I washed it, okay? And I laid it out flat and I shaped it with my fingers. I did not do a full pin blocking. Why? Because it didn't need that much tension. I didn't need to like take out any curl. I wasn't trying to open up any lace. So I didn't need to do a lot of stretching with this. But if I had been super aggressive when I blocked this out, right? I pin blocked it, I really stretched it. The nice squishiness that this has from the garter stitch would have been lost. It would have been more like this.
You can very easily overblock a cotton project.
So you gotta be a little bit more gentle when you are like stretching and pin blocking or anything like that with cotton. Here's the thing about cotton that's interesting though. It loves a steam block. Like it absolutely adores a steam block. And something you can always do when it comes to finishing cotton, wash it, lay it out flat to dry, just do some minimal like shaping to dry flat. You want to dry your cotton projects flat, okay? Then after it's dried, go back and do a nice steam block. Or if you need to reblock something, just doing it with steam can be really helpful. So yeah, if you'd like me to do a video on steam blocking and it's kind of its uses, let me know down in the comments. So there it is. Those are my top tips for working with cotton, and I'd love to hear from you. Is there anything I missed? Do you have a tip or trick that everybody needs to know about? Please let me know down in the comments below, or if you have any questions, anything that you need clarified, or you're like, hey Carrie, I could really use a video demonstration of this or that, please let me know down in the comments below. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If so, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your other knitting friends. Liking videos, sharing videos, commenting on videos, all great ways to help support my channel. And of course, the best, most important way to support me is to click the subscribe button and the notification bell. So once again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you have a wonderful day, evening, weekend, weeknight, whenever you may be watching this. And as always, happy health and happy making. Bye. And even though, and this is something that I went back up. Well, first of all, I really highly recommend looking for patterns. Those little scales on the yarn is what helps make split. And this is one of the reasons I think sometimes feel like items don't look as good when knitting, because you really want to make sure that you're picking.